Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1219 of our daily content grind. Today, we're going to be looking at Transformers Reactivate again because ever since the cancellation happened, there's been a lot of fallout, both from the fandom itself and their wild speculation, as the fandom loves to do, and also from a few things we've heard from the people behind the scenes and the developers, because there's some things that are coming to light that I want to make sure get out there and they don't get buried as forum posts or anything. Okay, so before we get into that though, we're going to make this very clear from the start, because the last time we talked about Reactivate and the cancellation, everyone jumped to the exact same conclusion, and I understand why, but we're going to nip that in the bud immediately because you are wrong. It's not the case. According to the people who worked on this game, Hasbro had nothing to do with the cancellation. Understand, they had nothing to gain from actually canceling this game or like pulling money or anything. Odds are they might not have even been investing money in this. They might have just sold the license to, I guess, Liu first and then to Tencent. And that might have been as far as the business transaction went. So they might not have even been investing money into the project to even be able to cancel it. No. From everything we've heard, from everything that's been said, this was entirely internal. It is the fault of Tencent canceling the game rather than any other outside factors, Hasbro included. I feel like ever since they announced that they would no longer be funding the movies, then everyone has been jumping on that. That's the reason why you're immediately making that assumption. You're wrong. I'm sorry, you are. And keep in mind, they did that for the movies after the movies turned 3 of their 4 last outings into box office failures. That's actually not a bad business decision. That's fine. Doesn't mean there won't be any more Transformer movies, just means Hasbro's not paying into it now. If you want it to be good, you're on your own. Not the case here. Not the case here, and we'll explain more of that as we go. First off, we need to discuss the conspiracy theory. So there's this story going around right now. It got posted on TFW 2005, not as a news story, but just something in the forums, just something that was speculated on. So the question right now is, was this a scam from the beginning? Did Liu only buy the license to have a much better looking portfolio before they sold off the company? And then we do know that, okay, Alexa Zhu actually did just walk from the company after the sale. That's what happens sometimes. You know, sometimes the people at the top of the company just kind of sit at the board of directors of the new company and they just keep working. Sometimes they just take the money and run. That's not necessarily a scam. Sometimes you're just done with this industry. That happens. So it is possible. And I don't think it's accurate to say Liu and Splash Damage had layoffs. This because there's 2 separate occasions, 2 separate incidents caused that. It's terrible that anyone got laid off from this, but don't lump it in like that's part of the scheme here. I don't necessarily think I believe that. Yeah, Liu absolutely could have bought the Transformers license just to fluff up their portfolio and sell for a higher price. But they did start paying. They did start paying for the brand new game. You know, they actually started like putting people in place. They actually got the ball rolling. That's money they spent in order to get something produced. If they were just buying the license, they wouldn't have picked a company to start working on it. So I don't know if I necessarily believe that part. Also, this was in 2017 when the license acquisition was announced. Let's see where Transformers was in 2017, shall we? The Last Knight was the most recent movie. A critical failure, a failure amongst fans, and most importantly, the first big box office failure of the Transformers brand. This is already not a good start, not a good look. On top of that, we have the existing games for Transformers at the time. This is a whole thing in and of itself. So let's be clear here. Transformer games have never been fantastic. The highest selling game ever was the first Transformers movie game at 2.5 million copies. Now that's across all of the platforms. So that doesn't just include the PS2 game that followed the course of the movie, and that followed the DS game that was a completely different telling and a completely different game, essentially. But still, that's your high watermark, and really not even a great game. They've been in decline since then. I know we like to go on and on about, War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron and how good those games are, but the truth here is that War for Cybertron sold just over 1 million copies, which is fine for like a game that wasn't involved with a major studio. But Fall of Cybertron only did about 800,000 copies, so you could already see a decline, and it kept going from there. Rise of the Darkspark sold just over 700,000 copies, decline continuing, and this game was critically panned. It was not a good game. And beyond that, we can go on about like Transformers Devastation. We know that Devastation was a really good game. It's only sold over 600,000 copies. Anyone in the gaming industry would see that this franchise was declining with every output, and no matter whether it was a good game or a bad game, it was going downhill. Meaning that I don't really think they would have seen so much value in the brand and the franchise at the time, based solely on the fact that, from a video game standpoint, this was a losing brand. This was just not a well-selling brand. And it never has been, which is upsetting. If we look outside of everything else in 2017, you had, Robots in Disguise was wrapping up on its 3rd season, so not the best remembered series, and kind of a light season general, like not the best Transformers has ever done. If you want to look elsewhere, you had like the Machinima series that, of course, is critically panned by fans, just overall total failure. And that was in season 2 at the time. So we weren't looking too hot in the animated department either. Just like today, the shining spot in Transformers media seems to be the comic books, because IDW was in this really hot period of like Lost Light, the Optimus Prime titled book, Till All Are One, really solid books and really good storytelling. But that was about it. That's all we really had going for us in 2017, other than, hey, we were good a few years ago. So they could have absolutely bought that in order to just fluff up their portfolio and then sell off the company. But that's speculation. It's hearsay. More importantly, it really doesn't factor into this. And I think people are getting so distracted by the conspiracy theory chase on that side. Like, you're completely forgetting, like, that really didn't have anything to do with the cancellation of the game. Really, like, switching the development studios, yes, that had an impact. Switching the engine had an impact. We're finding out now there's a lot more behind it than that. So this is what I really wanted to talk about today. We just have to put those factors aside for now, because that's part of the discussion. But I think it's mostly a distraction. Like, that's just not something you really have to focus on. And I think it's mostly speculation anyway. Here's where we really have to go through. This is a post off of Reddit. And now we're going to preface this. We're taking everything with a grain of salt, because this is a burner account by the admission of the poster. And we don't know if it really is someone who worked on Reactivate. We genuinely don't know. Of course we don't know, because that's the whole point of an anonymous account. But that said, the way this speaks, the way it's worded, and the fact that at no point does it go on and attack Hasbro the way the fandom is so eager to do right now, that tells me that this does have an air of credibility to it. Also, the fact that it actually corroborates some things we've heard from the developers who have actually spoken out on their social medias. This actually makes sense. This sounds correct. This doesn't sound like trolling. This doesn't sound like anything that's going to fire up the fandom like an actual false account likely would. This genuinely sounds like it comes from someone who knew what was going on. So while we are going to take it with a grain of salt, this does feel correct. And I feel like it's important to get it out there so it doesn't just get lost in a forum post, lost on a Reddit page, just so more people are aware of the situation. Okay? So let us go bit by bit here. So, TLDR, Splash switched from making a live service free-to-play game to trying to make the premium AAA Transformers game we hoped you all wanted a few years back. However, we never settled on a final vision for that game and so spent years going around in circles making cool demos that never extended much beyond 1 or 2 missions and 3 Transformers. So that does kind of explain a lot, doesn't it? If they were trying to switch, because like we already knew even back then, free-to-play games and like microtransaction-based live service games were not being well received. So I can understand the switch, but going to like the idea of making a AAA quality game when you were in the middle of developing something else, that is going to take a huge toll on your development cycle. You know, you're shifting to a completely different style of game at that point. And I can understand the shift. You know, if you are passionate about Transformers, and it sounds like these people were, then yeah, you wouldn't want to settle for just some trash free-to-play loot and shoot game. You'd actually want it to feel like a real proper Transformers experience. You know, I have spoken about this many times on the channel. We're still looking for a video game that lives up to how big and popular this franchise is. We still haven't gotten it. Looks like they were trying, came up short. Tencent believed it is enough to give us. Tencent believed in it enough to give us an extra year beyond our original deadline, but eventually it was obvious to them and Splash that we weren't making enough progress, and they finally pulled the plug back in summer 24. Since then, Splash has been scrambling to find either other funding for Transformers or more hopefully another project for the team. That's failed, and so they finally announced the cancellation and layoffs of a huge chunk of the team who worked on it. So that explains why we didn't get the updates in 2024 that we expected. It wasn't just that they were busy converting the whole game to Unreal Engine 5. It's that they were converting a free-to-play game into a AAA quality game and going through a lot of nonsense with Tencent at the same time. It is good to see that they managed to keep things going for another year. That's another year of employment for everybody who was working on that team. So like, it sounds like that was a small blessing compared to everything else. It sounds like they tried everything they could. Like, if they knew 6 months ago that this game was canceled, then yeah, like, to have no updates for 6 months makes absolute sense. And if, you know, like, to not announce it immediately meant, yeah, they would have actually been trying to find someone else to keep the game going and fund it. Let's see what else. Most of the leaks you've been looking at for years were from these certain Affinity days and didn't represent what Splash had been doing. Everything about the game, including the story, changed so often that apart from it being post-apocalyptic, everything else you've seen and heard was long since out of date. That recent gameplay leak is the first leak I've seen that was Splash content, but even that was years old from the final free-to-play version. Not seen any leaks from any of the premium demos. The team at Splash were always professional, so it didn't surprise me they never leaked stuff. You know, that does seem to match up. All the leaks that we have seen have mentioned that they are mostly from the certain Affinity days from the original build, back when it was likely called Rise still, before Reactivate was attached to it. It's hard to tell what parts of this was the original story and what parts were the new story. Was Legion still a thing? Like the human characters we saw in the trailer that, you know, we're never even going to know the names of at this point. Like a lot of this does seem to make sense. Yeah, because a lot of the leaks that we saw did seem to be older. They looked good. And again, because they mentioned that this is all from like the free-to-play stuff, back when it was like the original concept for the game, it does kind of make sense, again, that this feels like a legitimate story. This feels like it legitimately came from someone who knew what they were talking about. Because I feel like if you were going to troll, you would have been referencing like what that footage was as like the final version of the game. You know, not to admit like, yeah, there's a premium version out there. We tried to make it AAA level, but what you're seeing was not that. That disconnect there actually makes it more believable for me. Why was the development such a failure? Splash spent years successfully doing work for hire, and the 10-cent buyout was supposed to be their chance to work at their own projects. Sadly, switching to owning our own project was a total mess. Without another company taking the creative reins and holding us to account, we just went around in circles, never happy with anything. Every transformer, every enemy, every level was redesigned over and over. We had so many different leadership people join and leave the project, each one of them unhappy with something or everything, causing us to throw away months of work and start again. We just did this over and over and ended up with no game but lots of unused assets. This is such a common story in the gaming industry that it's sad and pathetic at this point, where you don't have proper leadership to actually manage a game correctly. It's one of the things that balloons the budget of a video game franchise or a video game's production so ridiculously high. It's not the amount of creators and artists that are working on it. It's just the fact that you have so many people trying to get what they want out of the game that you're going in so many directions and no one's just focusing on getting it done and getting it to the point that everyone agrees on at first. A lack of leadership will kill any project, especially one this big and expensive. And across a 7-year development, imagine, across 7 years of development, 2 different development teams and a switch in game engines, can you even imagine how many leadership changes there were for this team? And to go through months worth of effort to satisfy one just for someone else to take their place and want something completely different. It sounds like this game was hell to work on. If someone was here for like years working on the development and they just had to constantly redo what they were, doing, like I couldn't imagine doing months worth of work just to have someone come in and say, scrap all of this, we're not using any of it, try again. I remember in school crying because I had to redo 1 page of homework that I had done in advance for the teacher before. I can't imagine. It sounds horrific. But yeah, like when you're working with a company that doesn't set proper leadership in place or just can't make up its mind about who should be in charge of this, what vision to follow, yeah, like that makes a lot of sense. That's going to kill any project no matter what in any industry, not just gaming. Anything that requires a team effort needs to have a leader in place, and it needs to be a leader with a vision that everyone can believe in and stick to. Without that, it's chaos and anarchy, and it sounds like development was chaos and anarchy. One thing I want to promise though, believe it or not, the team loved Transformers and wanted to make an incredible game the fans would love. We ditched free-to-play live service when it became obvious people wouldn't love it, so no one was blind to all the failures like Avengers. The various versions of the story were all love letters to the fans. So many people working on it were huge Transformer fans and really wanted this to be the big AAA game we've dreamed of. The start of that is, I fully believe this was a fan project because of the balance, what we did see of the game, including characters that don't really get a lot of love, like Power Glide, for instance. Knockout from Prime being amongst a bunch of G1 characters because Knockout's really popular and does not get a whole lot of attention. Slipstream. A lot of fans really, really like Slipstream. She's never used in anything since Animated. It would have been fantastic to see her. We got a little bit of her in Cyberverse, and that was it. She didn't even last that long, unfortunately. So it does feel like fans were definitely at the helm for this. It genuinely does. It genuinely does. So I believe that. I also have to remember that Avengers released in 2020, meaning that would have been right around the time of them having to switch up development, and ditch the free-to-play model. That makes absolute sense. This is something that the games industry is still struggling with because it looks like a pile of endless money to developers, so they put out a free-to-play, live service game, and then it bombs because they all suck. So it's good to see that they actually recognize that. If that's what caused the big delay, to avoid the game crashing and burning the free-to-play, black hole of relevancy, I would absolutely believe that too. You know, that was actually really smart of the developers to actually change it. But that does essentially mean going back to the drawing board. All you have are assets at that point that you have to use for the new version of the game and reimagine everything from the ground up. And as we've heard, assets upon assets upon assets that were just getting shoved to the side because a new guy in charge wanted different ones. I can see why this was so frustrating for so many people working on this. You know, from what I've seen, they did have a lot of passion. They are very upset that nothing came of it. I'm upset that nothing came of it. But at the very least, it seems like they actually did have our best interest in mind. They didn't want to give us free-to-play shovelware. They were trying to make a good game. And good games take money, good games take time, and not every company wants to shell all that out. Sadly, the version of what the AAA premium experience would be never really solidified despite experimenting with just about everything. It was a huge open world, and it was level-based, and it was Division-style hybrid, and it was Wildlands-style open world. We had MMO-style bosses and a horde mode at one point. We tried everything, and nothing was ever good enough. Nothing ever stuck. Transformers, to be fair, is a difficult brand to actually work into a game that isn't just some schlock beat-em-up or shooter. Creating a really genuine AAA experience out of this franchise has always eluded people every time anyone has gotten the license. So I don't really blame. I really don't blame Splash Damage here. It's not an easy task. It sounds like what they were doing is stuff that should have been done 7 years ago. Figure out what works best for this franchise. Figure out what works best for creating a Transformer experience, and just stick to it. You know, but they had to go through that feeling out period 4 years into development, which is way too late to figure out what you're actually going to go for through, for your game. I can see what they're doing here, but oh my God, yeah, like you can see from that, like just how badly the shakeup was, and like how badly like switching from one style of game to another really did hamper a lot of things. It's the right decision, but that's where a lot of the problems hit. Toward the end, maybe we were starting to figure it out, but we were 3 years in and with only a single cool demo level to show for all that time and effort. It was a huge shame, but probably the smart business move from Tencent. I hate to admit it, but like, yeah, like they're not wrong here. They're not wrong here. You know, when a game's been in development that long, like take a Duke Nukem Forever, for instance. That game was in development for over a decade. Over a decade, and when it came out, nobody liked it. Because it was basically released in like a half-polished state. Just for the sake of getting it out there and just being done with the nightmare. So I can understand like wanting to avoid that process. Also, at this point, you know, across both owners, you know, across both companies, they've probably had so much money dumped into producing this game that was not coalescing. You know, from a business aspect, yeah, like I can't really blame them. It's horrible to do. It's horrible to do to all the creative minds. You know, this is where unions would be great. You know, this would be where guaranteed contracts would be great. We don't get that kind of stuff in the games industry, which makes the game industry really toxic sometimes. Yeah, it is upsetting. It is upsetting, you know. And again, I don't fault Splash Damage. You know, they inherited a project that was already 3 or 4 years into development and decided that it wasn't going the way that it needed to go in order to make fans happy and create a good game. So, yeah, they had to figure out a lot of stuff at a stage where they really should have been finalizing the game. That's not Splash Damage's fault. That's the failure of the previous developer. All the stuff about this being a Liu scam, I don't know. Maybe it was all that was true for Liu, but never from Splash and Tencent side. From that side, a long, genuine, very expensive effort was made to make a game. It just wasn't meant to be. And that's the unfortunate part. So, yeah, again, it's speculative. I don't necessarily think it was a scam to just buy the license just to have a higher selling price for the company. Not necessarily. Possible, but given the franchise's poor performance in the video game market, it's not really going to do what I think a lot of people are speculating it was going to do. Would it raise the price? Sure, but by a significant amount, probably not, for being honest here. Yeah, but it's, but from Splash and Tencent side, I gotta understand. Like, again, like I said, it's a distraction. It really shouldn't be part of this. The story here is a lot of effort from a lot of passionate people working on this game that didn't materialize, who are now out of work. One thing that is universal across businesses. While most of the team who worked crazy hours over and over are now looking for work, the leadership figures who sent us around in circles all got to keep their jobs. And again, like I said before, this industry can be absolutely toxic. We've seen this over and over again in the games industry, where a game does not materialize because of the very obvious fault of leadership and lack thereof. And then it's the developers, the artists, the programmers. Those are the ones who get punished for it, because they couldn't follow absolutely absurd requirements or the constantly changing and shifting goalposts of the leadership. And even if the leadership is changing, every other month, it's heartbreaking is what it is. It is absolutely heartbreaking. The people who got laid off did not deserve it, and the people who absolutely screwed up this project, ruined it for the team, cost the team their jobs, they're still collecting a paycheck from Tencent, and it's pathetic. It is disgusting. You already felt bad for the team not getting to show off the work that they put so much time and energy into, just to see the people who screwed them over still collecting paychecks and not having to worry about, how they're going to pay rent next month. It's really, really frustrating. So, we're going to end off by going back to Neil over on Blue Sky, who states that their NDA is up in 5 months. NDAs suck, by the way. And you see, he's not the only one who's being very public about this, but Neil is obviously really hurting from this, and I don't blame them. It's upsetting for a lot of people, but the people who really worked on it, yeah, those are the ones that this story is really about. Those are the ones I feel terrible for. In 5 months, I feel like every Transformer YouTube channel is going to be talking about this game again, because those NDAs are going to expire. Every single one who has a story to tell is going to find an outlet or 2 or 3 to find it. I know the Reactivate socials were following me. If anyone happens to watch this video who was on that team, please feel free to give me a contact. Feel free to get in touch when it is time to actually talk about this experience. I would love to know what really happened, what the game was supposed to be, the AAA version that we will never get to see. I don't want this to end up being one of the big mysteries of Transformers. If I can help get it out there, what this was supposed to be and what kind of game we were supposed to get, I would love to help tell the story. So I've got my contacts. You can find them if you are serious, and you can actually prove that you were part of the team. That's going to be a big factor to that. But for now, we're going to leave it off there. This is probably the last time we're going to get to talk about this. Now, obviously, once again, take everything with a grain of salt. We don't know for fact that Reddit post is from a real developer, but it feels like it. The stories they're telling and the things they're going on about and the things they are not mentioning. There's no Hasbro bashing like the fandom is currently very eager to do. The absence of that alone tells me, okay, this actually might be on the level. So we're doing this video just for the sake of that all being out there and being a much more public space than just a Reddit post, but keep it reserved. This might end up being a completely pointless video, and we'll find out a week from now, oh, this is all just made up. But you know what? I think it's important enough now to at least get a more calm version of what's going on out there, and to put this story not on corporate conspiracy theory, but the developers and the creators of the games that were really the ones hurt by this whole thing. So that's where my mind is. That's where the focus should be. And that's going to be the video for the day. we'll probably hear from Reactivate again in the summer. So until then, thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.
You've been waiting a long time, haven't you? But the wait's almost over. You're about to meet the brightest star in the universe. We're going to make an impact.